Welcome to The Artful Exchange, the podcast where we explore the rich and inspiring worlds of art, design, poetry, and creativity. I'm your host, the poetic designer from Winter Design, and I am thrilled to introduce today's guest, Deborah Alma. Deborah is a UK-based poet, editor, and educator who has dedicated her life to bringing power of poetry to diverse audiences. Her work with poetry has spanned dementia care, hospice support, and vulnerable women's groups and schools, all while lecturing at universities like Worcester and Keele. In 2012, Deborah launched the incredible Emergency Poet Project, offering poetry on prescription from a vintage ambulance, a beautifully poetic approach to healing. In 2019, she co-founded the world's first walk-in poetry pharmacy in Shropshire with her partner, poet James Sheard. This space blends literature with mental health support, and Deborah's mission to make poetry accessible continues to grow. With her second location now in London, in Oxford Street, her work has made poetry more alive and interactive than ever. Her debut poetry collection, Dirty Laundry, was the book that caught my attention, and before and since then, she has authored several more. Through her poetry, her books, and her unique approach, she's managed to create an extraordinary bridge between art and healing. Please have a listen to our bonus episode that I made just before this episode, where I am reading aloud poems from Deborah's book, Dirty Laundry. It is such an honour to have you here with us today, Deborah. Thank you so much for joining.
It's my great pleasure. Thank you, Tanya. That was a bit of an introduction. Thank you. I'm very honoured.
I am in awe by everything you've done. So I think it's vital that we, introduce you and explain everything you've done. I mean, it's probably much more than this as well, but that's all I could fit into an introduction, really. As I've told you before, I find that your creativity and not least your productivity is just so inspiring, and how I am actually a little starstruck by you because of everything you do. I have to be honest. I think it's just so beautiful the way that you've managed to bring poetry into people's lives in such a profound and accessible way. And not least making actually poetry a living, which isn't easy at all, I think we can all say. So maybe you might be able to share a bit of this today with us and the listeners, how you've managed to navigate a way to make poetry, okay for people.
It is a long story. I was saying to you earlier, I feel very old. I've been doing it for quite a long time now, and I guess I went in. I didn't go into it intending to make a living. I was a single parent with a kind of normal job when I started doing the Emergency Poet Project. I'd done my MA in creative writing, and I was doing some sort of small work as well as a single parent and working full time. And I was working with people with dementia, using poetry to assist communication. And I think it was doing that work that taught me a lot about how poetry can affect somebody's mood in a real profound way. That it can be both a bridge of communication, but also it can take them to places. You can take them to the sea. It can take them to flying a kite, and I also learnt that people really love to be asked lovely questions. They love good attention, and so that I took all of that. I didn't realise I was doing that at the time, but I was looking on eBay for buying a camper van, just as you do, to see if it's possible, and came across a vintage ambulance, and then the idea of the emergency poet came to me in a kind of moment of madness, with all of my friends saying, "Don't do it, Deb." So
I love it.
So on
Absolutely
the one
love the
hand,
idea.
I'm kind of doing the profound work, and then the emergency poet was set up explicitly, really, to take poetry to people who don't normally encounter it, to literally put it in front of them as a piece of theatre and a pastiche of a therapy session, really. So, and that's how that happened.
How long did you have that ambulance truck driving around?
Well, it was bizarre because, you're talking about making a living. It became my living. I did one poetry festival and thought, it was just fun, and it wouldn't last really. But then I was invited to two more events, and then those two more led to another four, and so on. And it meant that I was able to give up my sensible job and become a professional emergency poet. So I did that for I think it was about 9 years in total, going all over the country. In fact, I even did it in New Zealand. I was invited to New Zealand, and yes, all over the country, and Ireland as well, and at festivals, music festivals, poetry festivals, literature festivals, schools, libraries, conferences, weddings, even. Getting invited
You've
to
really
weddings.
met all sorts of people along the journey then, and connected in so many ways.
Yes.
Yeah.
And people would come into the back of the ambulance, lie down on the stretcher. I dressed up as a doctor. I had a poetry pharmacy under the awning with my little bottles of pills with poems in them to give away.
Oh, you
And
had the pills then as well?
right from the beginning, actually. I had we had a very small range of them, but they were just for people that didn't have time to come and have a full consultation. They could stand and talk to Nurse Verse outside, and self-medicate for whatever problem that they had, whether it was empty nest syndrome or a broken heart or whatever. So right from the beginning, I did it really badly early on, but yeah, I've been there
But
since.
you obviously made it work. I mean, you made it into a living, which is just mind-blowing for me, actually. So,
Yeah.
and it must have been just for you as well, a bit of a shock that you could make it into a living, I imagine. Or
Yes, yeah, particularly for my friends and family as well. My
yeah.
children, my two teenage boys at the time were horribly embarrassed by having an ambulance comedy ambulance parked outside. And I
Yeah.
was doing the sort of the other work still as well. It overlapped. I did some work in a hospice doing leave taking poems. So those kind of going in and out of taking poetry and making it appropriate for the setting, I suppose.
Yeah. Maybe we could just explain to the listeners now that don't really fully understand what these pills are about. What exactly are these pills?
Well, it was a piece of theatre to sort of explain the metaphor, or the conceit as poetry as medicine. So inside each bottle is a normal pill capsule. The ones that you pull apart, and if you pulled apart the medicine would be inside. But inside each pill is a rolled up scroll of paper with an extract from a poem written on it, which is relevant to whatever's on the front of the bottle. So I think we have 45 different titles now, and that we keep making new ones all the time.
In the walk-in poetry
Yes,
pharmacies,
yeah.
yes.
Now
It's
we
such a
have
genius idea, I think.
a slightly odd thing to do, but it's been really
I
successful.
love
And
it.
when we
Yeah.
opened the bookshop here in Shropshire, which was 5 years ago now, we weren't selling them, from the ambulance. We were giving them away, but
Oh, okay.
I had them here in the bookshop to explain the place again. So they explain the conceit, but then people were really loved them and were buying them. So we do quite well with those, and we sell them online and in both bookshops.
Oh, you do sell them online. I haven't noticed
Yes.
that. I'm so sorry
Yeah.
because I really want to get some. So
But you
I
can
didn't know. Okay, but I think just going inside because you now have, actually, I first and foremost, I have to say congratulations because you recently just opened one more walk-in store in London. So you now exist in Shropshire and
Mhm.
London, Oxford Street.
Yeah.
Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
That
It's
was
quite a stretch from sleepy Shropshire to the busiest shopping street in the world, and it's been
I can imagine.
quite a lot of hard work to cope with the increased demand.
But again, my goodness, you definitely don't sit still, do you?
No, I
No.
don't. The poetry pharmacy was conceived in the first place explicitly as a kind of third place. I don't know if you've come across that expression before. There's a sociologist called Ray Oldenburg who says that as human animals, we need a first place of home and then a second of work, but the third place is a place we choose to come to. So libraries, a coffee shop, or a bookshop would be those kind of third places. But so we have the coffee shop, the bookshop laid out by emotional states. We do consultations here. We have a physic garden and a writing hut that people can borrow. We have a poetry library. We do workshops and open mics and book launches, and all sorts of things happen here. So it's not just a
And
bookshop.
for someone living abroad who might want to visit both places, how would one get from London to Shropshire?
Um, this place in Shropshire is in the middle of nowhere with not even a train station, so it's really
Oh,
difficult to get to. So most people
okay.
would drive. There's a
Okay.
station about 10-15 minutes drive, but not
Okay.
many taxis. It's very remote, rural. So it was an act of
Right.
madness to open it in the first place. Excuse
So
me.
one would need to rent a car then, basically, to get there.
Yeah, you
I
would.
mean, you have told, it sounds so lovely, how the story started, but I'm just curious, like, have you always been writing poetry, or how did you venture into it? Did it come about because you were working with people in dementia and hospice care?
No,
Or
that came out of the poetry really. I went
right,
to do a creative writing degree. I think I was in my 40s, so quite
right,
late, and learned that poetry was the thing that I enjoyed writing. I'd always read poetry um, and had written terrible poetry when I was young through kind of teenage angst and brokenheartedness, when I was very young. But
as we all,
um, yeah, yeah.
yeah,
And then, of course, when you've got small children at home and you want to write, poetry is much easier. You can finish something quickly. You don't get much time, and so poetry felt like the right thing to do. Yeah, no, I it was through being a writer, through doing my degree and then an MA, that I ended up doing work with poetry in a kind of wider community sense. Working. I did some work with people with sight loss as well as with people with dementia, um, and just yeah, it was like a eureka thing of what poetry is capable of. Really,
yeah,
hadn't really
right.
realised that until I saw it with my own eyes, I suppose. I think I'd been quite cynical. So I've become overzealous probably now.
That must have been so stunning. I mean, they also say music helps,
Yes,
music and poetry. I think everything that has to do with touching our souls basically
yeah,
helps
yeah,
in times.
yeah. And being properly in the present with somebody, music is there,
Yeah,
poem is there. Um,
yeah.
you're alongside somebody with the art, yeah.
Well, you have written many poetry books. I mean, how many are we talking now?
I have I've only got one single collection of my own. So all of but I've edited quite a few, and they're edited collections of other
Yeah.
poets' work. And I'm working on 8 at the moment, actually, for the publisher Macmillan, that matches each of the sections of our bookshops. So one for each section, which I love doing. I really love curating poetry anthologies. But yeah, I've only have one poetry collection of my own.
The Dirty Laundry.
Yes, I
which
don't have
I
much
have.
time for my own writing. Do you like it?
I do.
Thank you very
Several
much.
poems in there that really just are with me. And I would like to tell our listeners that if you have not read it, definitely look up Dirty Laundry by Deborah Alma.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know what to say
It's liberating to read because it's very honest. It's an honest book on contemporary women, basically. Is that a good way of putting it, Deborah?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the phrase "dirty laundry," airing your dirty laundry is is kind of what it is. It's not for the faint-hearted. It's kind of difficult to share sometimes as well because it is sometimes sexually explicit, and it is very honest, about being a woman coming through difficult relationships. I'm mixed race, so I talk about that in there.
It's funny how that when we start having to read our poems, our personal poems aloud to people, that's when we start understanding how difficult it is to actually share it.
Yes,
I find that so hard.
Yeah, you find that hard too.
Oh, just
Some people
absolutely.
don't, but I do. Yeah.
Sorry?
Some people don't find it difficult, do they? They're quite happy with doing that, but I do. I do find it difficult. When I'm writing, I don't know about you, Tanya. It's you and the pen and the page, and that kind of playful, creative act of making something, which I love doing. But I was doing an MA. I had to write for that, and then you kind of have to overcome. Well, I had to overcome a kind of squeamishness really about sharing it, and also I always think I could be better, and so it's never quite good enough. So yeah, I've always felt quite reticent about sharing my own.
I think many of us are like that. We can always be better, but then I think becoming older has helped, as well, for me at least, that I'm like, I don't really care that much what people think anymore.
Yeah, that's
used
true.
to care a lot.
Yeah. And also you're going ahead to say to younger people, actually, it kind of gives them permission to try and to have a go.
Exactly.
As well. It's sort of helpful, in a community way as well, maybe.
It is. But then we have social media, which I do want to touch base with you about as well, because that has definitely become its own thing now. I mean, it's also brought poetry. Poetry has become accessible and interesting for young people through TikTok, Instagram, and it's also learning me to maybe show my face sometimes to be it's safe to talk on a podcast that does not have a video or it's all audible. Then it just feels safer, doesn't it, to say something or read aloud. But once you're showing your face, it's just a new thing. But that's what social media has taught us. Now, what do you really think about this new era and social media? What has it done with poetry, do you think? I mean, do you like it or are you negative to it?
I like it. It is both a blessing and a curse. And I think you have to see it as a tool, and it's whatever whose ever hand it's in, it is the thing, I suppose. But we couldn't have survived without it. Excuse me, because we're in the middle of nowhere. We had sorry,
No, that's okay.
Because we're in the middle of nowhere. We have no choice but to make ourselves known through social media or media of some sort. So we've had BBC come and film here and other media being involved. But it is that spread. When we opened in Oxford Street, the first 3 weeks, nobody knew we were there, really. It was very quiet. And then it was picked up. and shared. It's very pretty. It's a, visually, aesthetically pleasing space. So it's very Instagrammable, and that's done self-consciously. I kind of describe it as a poetry sweet shop, so that it elevates the objects. I'm a bookseller. The objects are important as well. People need help to find the book that they might enjoy. So, the cover, how it's displayed, in which section it is, so that people can find it more easily. But yes, and then people take lovely photographs of the space and lovely photographs of beautiful coffee or whatever, and share it. And
the pills,
the
not
pills,
least, I
yeah.
imagine.
And
The
again, they're
prescription pills.
pretty. They're
Yeah.
very visual. And the
Yeah.
emergency poet was a visual thing in a world of most poetry being displayed spine on, with its very skinny little shells. And I suppose skinny little spine. So I suppose that's what I've done differently, is I've pulled it out and made it visible, maybe.
So let me then ask you, what's the poetic prescription for a broken heart?
Yes, you were talking about prescriptions for different emotional ailments, and one of the things that I do is talk to people to try and learn more about them, about how they relax, how they look after themselves, their reading habits, to get a sense of the kind of text that I might find for that particular person, because there are different kinds of broken heart. So I would go a little bit deeper, how long ago did the relationship end, or is it over? Are you in the middle of it? All of those questions. But it just, the poem that comes to mind is a poem by Derek Walcott called Love After Love. I don't know if you know that poem. You can find it online quite easily, but it talks
Okay.
about
All right.
falling in love with your own rich and interesting life, and letting go of other things, but being properly yourself in the world first. So that's the one I would choose, probably.
I will be looking that up. Thank you.
In London, we don't have enough space, sadly, because we're inside Lush on the first floor, to have a consulting room. So we don't do consultations in London, which is a sad thing. But
Okay.
we're looking to have another poetry pharmacy next year somewhere else, but that we haven't quite decided.
In London?
Well, maybe another one in London, maybe another one inside another Lush, maybe another one inside another city like Bath or York or something.
Oh, yeah, that would be great.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're becoming huge.
Well,
This is really taking off. I
it is
don't know.
taking off. It has
Yeah.
a momentum of its own, oddly.
Yeah.
You find that the next step becomes obvious without any planning, maybe.
Are there any new books that might be coming out soon that we would like to know about, Deborah?
Well, I'm in a period of working on quite a lot all at once. So I've just finished working on a book called The Poetry Business School, with Mark Constantine, who is the CEO of Lush. We've had a kind of developing friendship, where he's kind of mentored me in an exchange in poetry. So it's the most unusual book, and that's coming out with HarperCollins in the spring. And I'm also working with Macmillan to edit these 8 poetry anthologies as well. So, I've got too many things going on, probably, but they're all
busy
great
bee as always.
Yeah, very busy.
Are you also into publishing, since you help others and you make collections and anthologies? Do you do publishing for people as well?
No. I'm not a publisher. If you, in a way, I'm a bookseller and an editor, and also a manufacturer. We also make our own products here. So we've employed lots of people now. We have lots of local people hand rolling these little pills into, and they're selling really well in London. They've gone a bit crazy. So our little business gone from, I think, 2 members of staff and me to over 20 in
Well
about
done
4
on
months.
that. Yeah.
Yes. Well, yeah, it has problems of its own. It's quite stressful.
It's a lot of managing,
Yeah.
definitely.
I think you wanted me to read a poem of my own.
That's
But
right.
how would you feel if I read a friend's poem? It's a kind of honouring of her thing, but
Okay.
it's also a poem that
Yeah.
I would stand by as a good quality poem that I would prescribe to people as well. So this poem is by Catherine Bevis, and it's called This. A fire has been lit in new leaves, will grow to a green world in the dark wood. Small whites rise in drifts to the swish of our boots. Nothing is worth more than this day. A pair of grey wagtails fly low, gold-bellied over the rushing river. Their bodies translate water to sunlight, sunlight to water. Nothing is worth more than this day. Here, the wind toys with leaves like loose change in the pockets of the sky. High above, a wood pigeon calls to us, wild and true. Who are you? Who? Nothing is worth more than this day.
Beautiful.
Yeah, it's a really good poem. Lots of
Yeah.
lovely internal rhyme as well. But the poignancy of being in the now and the present, and she knew she was dying as well. So that's it's really nice.
Right. Okay. So this was something she wrote at the very end.
Yeah. Well, she had a cancer diagnosis, so she knew for quite a long time. I think she had about 3 years to live after her terminal diagnosis. So yeah, she was extraordinary actually, very able to live in the moment, which the poem describes, doesn't it?
Thank you, Deborah, and thank you so much. It has been such a true honour to speak with you here today. I am super excited to keep on following you and your work, and I cannot wait to come visit you at the Poetry Pharmacy in Oxford Street. Wish you all the best of luck. And thank you also to our listeners for tuning in to The Artful Exchange. If you wish to learn more about our guest, Deborah Alma and the Poetry Pharmacy, please have a look in our description post for this specific episode to find the social media links and so on. Remember to follow The Artful Exchange. New episodes come out monthly. And until then, stay creative and inspired.